Hello, Michael here with another How Do I Render tutorial. Today we're going to be having a look at how to create a rocket trail using nParticles, and we're going to render it with Renderman. This particular thing is just an emitter. You could use it for anything. You could use it for a rocket trail, or you could use it for a car, exhaust, or you could even use it for something like, cigarette smoke or something like that, or a chimney. But we're going to use it for a rocket because this is what inspired me. I saw the trailer for the Lego movie, and I saw this rocket getting fired off. So I just clipped this from the trailer, and I saw that and I thought, well, that's pretty easy to do in something like with nParticles and render it with Renderman. So I thought I'd go through and show you how to do that. A couple of slight variations that we're going to be doing on this particular one are that the rocket has got this mesh here, which is like a Lego flamey shape, because obviously it's the Lego movie. You can see it a bit better there. With that, it looks like they have blended that shape into the smoke. You can sort of see it there. I'm not 100% certain. Or they've used maybe blobby emission rather than just spheres, but we're just going to use spheres because you'll see. It's going to look better for what we're doing. This obviously works really well for what they've done. But just as sort of a basic tutorial, it's going to be simpler to use spheres, and we'll get a similar effect. So you need a mesh. It can be anything. It could be a cube. It doesn't really matter. It could be a cone if you want it to make it look like a rocket. And we're just going to create an nParticle to emit from nearby, and then we'll group it in with your mesh. So if you've just got one mesh, then you just have to create a group and plug the nParticle into that. Or I've already created a group because I've got all mine modeled out in parts because I'm lazy. So we're going to go to the effects menu. We're going to go to nParticles, and we're going to go create emitter, and we'll call this rocket, and we're going to new solver, and it's going to be directional, and everything can be default otherwise, so we'll create that. So what will happen is you'll emit it, and it will emit this piddly little it will look like your rocket's urinating. That's fine. Or you can do a bit to make this look less like that. So also, it doesn't hurt to have the mesh that you're going to have at the origin, because obviously the emitter is going to go to the origin when you create it. So first thing we want to do in here is we're going to change the distance and direction. So we don't want to have it going anywhere on the x-axis. We want it to be going on the y-axis, and we'll just make it -1. So -1 on the y is up and down, -1 will be down. And so if we run that again, straight down. Now we're going to go to the particle shape node, and we're going to go to shading, and we're going to change that to spheres. So already you can see that's starting to look like something. Now if you change your timeline to be like 10,000, it just makes it a little bit easier, and you'll see that this is going to last forever, and your computer will start to have a stroke. So what you're going to want to do is change the lifespan, and we're going to make it random range, and we'll do 1 and 0.5, so half the time it will just die randomly. So now we'll get something that looks a bit more like that, a little bit more workable. So we want to grab our emitter. I'm just going to move that down till it's there, so it's underneath the booster. It needs to be a little bit lower. Alright, so get your emitter node quite close. At the moment it's going to clip your engine. That's fine. Well, it's going to clip my engine, it might not clip yours. But we're going to change some of the sizes, so that's not going to be an issue. So at the moment we're running at about 100 particles a second. We're going to actually scale rate by speed, which is not going to do much for us at the moment because the rocket's not moving, therefore the particles aren't moving. But as the particles move faster, it's going to produce more particles. And the reason you want it to do that is if the emitter is moving really fast and it's still producing the same amount of particles as it was at still versus 100 meters a second, there's going to be a bigger gap between the particles, and it starts to look a little bit less consistent. And I'm just going to increase that speed to say 6 and make it random most of the time, and then I'll make that much less. So what that gives us is a little bit of randomization in the smoke coming out, because that's sort of what you'd want to see. And then the good thing about having all these extra frames is you can just literally leave this running as you work on the end particle. So we'll go into the end particle shape. We've done the lifespan, so we're going to go to the particle size. I'm going to make that 0.8, and it's going to be Gigantor. But we want it to be Gigantor because this is going to be the maximum size of it. So think of the radius, this radius as the maximum size. And I want my smoke to sort of plume out larger than what the rocket is itself. And then what we're going to do is go to the radius scale and go to the radius scale input and change it to age. And then therefore it's going to start smaller and end larger. Something like that. So make sure, sometimes you will actually have to stop and restart your animation. So you can see that that is now creating something a bit more random like that. And it's maybe needs to come down just a fraction still. It's pretty tight and we just want a little bit of a gap. The emitter down a little bit. That's perfect. We're also going to change the scale of the particles to be randomized a little bit, because at the moment they're super consistent. So we'll just bring that up a touch, maybe to 0.2, 0.15, maybe 0.1. There's a lot coming out at the moment, but it's going to look like a lot less once we change scale, once we've got this animating. All right, next thing we're going to do is look at the shading. So we've already changed that to spheres, that's fine. And we're going to go into the color. Just run that out. So the color is going to start off pretty orangey yellow. And then it's going to go to an orangey red color. And we want to change this to age. So it starts off very yellow. That might be a bit too desaturated. And then it's going to go to like a peachy. This is sort of up to you, obviously, what you want to do. This is going to be a desaturated peachy kind of color. And then to a light gray. And I'm going to change those interpolations to be smooth, because it's smoke, or fiery smoke. It's going to look a little bit better like that. Alright, so at the moment, if we render this with Renderman, we can just do it in the window here. It's not going to work because it doesn't have a shader. Also, there's no lights in the scene, which you don't want. So first off, we're just going to chuck right click on there and Pixar Environment Daylight. And if we run that again, so I want my sun to be towards the front. So let's just change the time of day till that's the case, and then increase the intensity. That's a bit nicer. That's the sort of color I'm looking for. Yeah, so we get a nice highlight there. Actually, I kind of want it more of a... I'm just going to play with this for one hot second to get this to look how I want it to. Alright. So what I've done is just moved that sun so it's sort of behind the where the camera is now. You can see the reflection in the window there. Just so when I render this final animation, we're getting the light from where I want. So I'm not going to go into the big thing with the Pixar environment daylight, but you can actually just rotate it if you want to fine tune it. It doesn't actually rotate the mesh or sort of the curves. So it's a little bit unwieldy way to do it, but that's kind of a quick way of just getting around it. All right, so we need to get a shader on our smoke. So we'll just select our smoke and we'll create a shader, and then we'll go to the Hypershade editor. And we've got a new shader here, which we'll call Pixar Smoke. And we've already got a color in. So to get our color into our diffuse channel, we're going to use a primitive variable. So just hit tab, type in PxR primvar, and we're going to change the variable name to be CS, uppercase C, lowercase s, and the variable type to be color. So it's just going to grab the color information from our nParticles, run your result RGB into your diffuse color, and that should render. So at the moment, it doesn't look very exciting, but we're getting there. Next thing we want to do is we want to create some emission from it. Now the emission from the nParticles would normally work off incandescence. I, for the life of me, can't figure out how to plug that into Renderman. There is a way around it. We're just going to use opacity. This is probably not the best way to do it, but it works. So just sort of bear with me here. I will try and find out the correct way. It's with a primvar node. I'm pretty confident, but for the life of me, I can't figure out how to do it. So this will work though. So if you're stuck in a this sort of situation, then this will work. However, you won't be able to use opacity. So, well, your opacity will have to be the same as your incandescence. So what we're going to do is our opacity is going to be age, and as well, essentially this is going to be our incandescence. So what we want it to do is to be very bright at the start and then emit less towards the end there. So that's why you can see towards the end there it starts to become more transparent. So something like that is going to be fine. When you use a glow, it actually makes it highlight the smoke quite nicely, so it makes it a little bit easier to see it, particularly if it's a long shot. Now to hook this up, we're going to use another PxrPrim var, and this one's going to be variable name capital O lowercase s. It's going to be color. Set 3 on that to expand it, and we're going to type Pixar invert. Get an invert, run the RGB into the invert. Now this is the case if you're using the opacity node, the opacity graph, you will actually have to invert anyway. So if you're doing opacity for anything, just make sure you do the same thing here. And then we're going to create a to float, and that's just so we can run the RGB into a float input. So we'll select our shader node, and we'll just type in glow, select that, hit 3, type glow, and we'll run the result F into the glow gain, and then we're going to run the color of the diffuse color into the glow color. So now it's going to have the incandescent color of the diffuse channel, and it's going to glow with the channel of the intensity of the opacity that you can see here in the previewer, which gives you this result. So you can see the difference. Well, actually, I didn't have a long shot there, but you can see that it's a lot brighter at the start, and then it sort of becomes more just diffused. Now, still doesn't look very exciting, and I know you're thinking, this tutorial sucks, Michael. Stick with me. We've got a little bit more to do. So we will now save it, and we will create a Pixar disk light. The disk light is going to be the illumination on top of our incandescence for the smoke, and this is just a good way of emulating the engine. So I'm just going to rotate that -90 so it's pointing down. And what I want this to do is be above the emitter, essentially. Try and avoid any clipping if possible. And I want this to be quite large. And the reason I want it to be quite large is because I want it to create a highlight on the tops of all the different smoke plumes, particularly as if you've got your rocket sort of twisting around and stuff, you're going to get a lot better highlights this way. So the problem is it's going to also illuminate everything else in the scene. We don't want that. So what we're going to do is go to Windows, Relationship Editors, Light Linking, and we'll go Object Centric. Select nParticle. That's going to be correct. Go to this group. That's our rocket at the moment. We're going to deselect that disk light, and that's going to be now only illuminating our smoke. So if I hadn't done that, the bottom half of these little wings would have that illumination. Now this light, we want it to be sort of an orangey color because it's sort of like the engine, sort of flame, I guess, sort of emulating. And you will render it up and it'll look the exact same, and you'll be very confused, and then you'll remember to increase the intensity. And you'll start to see that it's blending in with the color of the smoke a little bit more now. I might actually make the smoke color around here just a bit more red, because you don't really like this area here where it's got color, where it's got, you know, a lot more primary color, is the area where essentially the flame is, and then the rest of it is just smoke. And we want it to be a little orange. There's going to be a little bit of a transition effect there, and then you can sort of play around with the length of that to determine how long you want it to look. And you can actually, you could even just make the first color orange and it doesn't look too bad either. I could just keep it like that for the sake of it. Alright, so starting to look a little bit like, so if we just get our sort of, you know, rough angle of what the reference is, sort of like that and that. So obviously the shape, the motion path that they're using is a little bit more exciting than just straight up and down. So we'll do that now. So we're going to put our rocket on a motion path, and then we can fine tune our emission so they're not all clumped together in one big blob like they currently are. So the first thing we want to do is put our emitter. Actually, I'm going to do one more thing just while I remember. Let's create another disk light, and we'll rotate that facing down. And this is just a little detail. Alright, so you want it facing down, however which way. And we're just going to make it so it's roughly the same size as the inside of the engine. You don't have to do this, but it does look a little bit better. And then we're just going to grab a orangey color. It can be a light orange color like that. Oh, and we want to enable primary visibility as well. Cool. So that little highlight just makes a bit of a difference when you compare that. You can't really quite see into that, and probably give an example. Just that little flash there just sort of sells the engine a bit more. All right. Now let's get this animating. So we've got a disk light here and a disk light here. They need to go with the rocket as it animates. So we'll put those in the rocket group. Call this rocket group. And this emitter, drag that in there as well. So now if we move this around, it will, you can't see the emitter because you'd have to replay it. But yeah, they'll move together, so that's fine. And I'm also going to move that to be a little bit above the origin, because we're going to put this on a motion path. If you put this stuff on a motion path and it travels through the horizon, so between negative space and positive space, so I'm going to sort of flip out a little bit there. Make sure all of your meshes have the same Y direction. That one doesn't. So we need to change that to be, let's go into modeling, modify, freeze transformations, and we'll just delete the history. So now what we're going to do is jump into the side view, and we're going to go to curves and surfaces, and we're going to create a new curve. And this is just our rocket. You can do whatever you want, whatever path you want. I'm just going to do a gravity turn, which is basically when a rocket takes off, it travels east to escape the Earth's atmosphere. So it's going to sort of go up vertically like this and then go that way. That's an intense gravity turn, but just it's fine. We're exaggerating here. But it will look cool with a cool camera angle, so we're happy with that. So what we want to do now is select your curve, select the rocket group in your outliner, or you can do it on, well, you need to do it in the outliner. Go to animation, and we're going to go to constrain motion paths and attach to motion path. And I think these settings are the correct settings for this one, so I'm just going to hit apply, and that does seem to be the correct settings. So if I play it now, that's not moving. All right, now make sure you change your timeline to be the correct length. So we probably need about, I don't know, let's call it 90 frames, 24 frames a second, just like 4 seconds. If you do a 10,000, it's gonna take a long time to go on that. And then we'll hit apply, and then now you can see that it goes all the way to the end. If you hit play, it goes all the way to the end. The problem being at the moment is that it slows down towards the end, so we're just going to go into the graph editor, which is Windows, Animation Editors, Graph Editor, and just going to grab that and just going to move it in like that, so it should sort of go faster and faster and faster. As you can see, as it escapes the Earth atmosphere, it goes a little bit faster. You can make that as intense as you like. Cool. All right, so that is our rocket taken off into outer space. So now if we just play that through, we'll get to say here, so we've got, as you can see, it's a little bit more interesting because it's turning. So the randomization is starting to come into play. You get that differentiation in the silhouette. You can still go into the emitter and change things if you like. So particles a second, you maybe want to reduce it. Depends exactly what you're going for. Let's have a look at our reference. Our reference, it's pretty tight. It's got a couple of areas where it's small, but we've got these big bits of mesh there as well. So that's kind of probably close to what they were doing. The only thing I don't like about that is that we get a little bit of separation there. So I'm just going to go to like 8. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, that doesn't look too bad. Let's see what it looks like on the render. Might go back to 10 even. Yeah, because it's accelerating quite a lot, particularly towards the end there, you're going to start to see a little bit more separation there. So maybe need to increase the speed. Yeah. So you can see that's closed it up quite a bit. And then it's just a matter of going through and adjusting particles per second. I think that's what I'm going to go with. So 8 particles a second and speed of 10, random 5. So we still get some obvious separate, spheres. And we get a nice bit of grouping there. And I've got quite a big gap there, but that sort of depends what you want. Because of that light there, it's going to make it sort of look like, not too bad. So this is our shot. It's a bit different than the shot in the movie, but we'll have a look at that in the IPR. And yeah, that looks pretty cool if we compare it to the movie. So things that we're getting right are that we're getting nice variation in the silhouette. Ours is a lot more saturated, so we might want to back that off if we wanted to go something more similar to that. They're obviously, we're using a very hot orangey yellow red, and they're using more of a lighter yellowy peach color, so we could go in and change that if we wanted to. The other thing that you'll be seeing here is that it's got this sort of flare effect. That's something that you'd probably do in compositing. You could do it with Renderman. It would be kind of a pain. I would probably just do it in Fusion or Nuke if that was the case. And obviously our trail is a little bit different than theirs because we're going on an arc and they're going sort of wiggly wobbly. And ours tapers from probably a little bit smaller to a little bit larger, which is I kind of like it for this. They've got a hotter light coming in, but that's just a matter of lighting it up differently. It's pretty close. It's not too, it's not too crazy off. And they also go to a darker grey, so we could also change that. I don't mind the darker grey, and I don't mind that either. So we might just quickly jump in there and just change those, and I'll show you what that looks like on the render. Okay, so what I've done is I've actually changed that to have only the 3 colors. We've got more of a peachy color there, and more of a saturated peachy color. And then this gray color is actually an orange, just a very desaturated orange, and it's at a sort of medium value. And that what that ends us up with is something that looks like that. So if you compare that and that, that's what we were sort of dealing with before. Oh, sorry, I think I might have overrun that render. Anyway, that's where we're at. You can you can just rewind and see what it was doing. So we're a little bit closer. I need to finagle a little bit more. I could probably do some stuff with the glow, but that's pretty close. Maybe add a little bit of specularity to the render as well, to the shader. Yeah, so you could just add in a bit more brighter face color, and just increase the roughness. You obviously don't want it to be too shiny. And yeah, you get a little bit more of those highlights there, so that will really make it pop, as you can see. And it hasn't changed that too much. You lose a little bit of the saturation, you might need to balance that out with the color, but realistically it doesn't make too much of a difference, and for what you get there, it's probably worth it. Might want to back it off a little bit, it could be a little bit too much at the moment. But the shot overall, very cartoony, very appealing. It's what we're looking for. Comparing it to the reference, obviously quite different, but same sort of technique. You get a good looking little rocket. And that is pretty much all there is to it. Render out an animation and show your friends and impress them with your skills. That's it for this one though. I hope you liked it. If you did, make sure you click the like button so other people can find it on YouTube. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, as I do a couple of tutorials every week, or a tutorial every week for all sorts of 3D stuff. If you would like to stay up to date, check out the Facebook page, link in the description. If you want to see more of my work as well, Instagram down there. That's it for now though. Thank you very much for watching, and happy rendering.